JetBlue will about to land at Johannesburg. Please fasten your seatbelts. Ensure that your seat backs are in the upright position. Heren, ons gaan binnekort land.
The public was very much at the center of the work. Public value is about considering the entire society, everyone, each of us, and the environment as well, nature, as active stakeholders of business. Thank you. So the first principle that was co-created is we govern, lead, and run a company on the principles of fairness, respect, and inclusion for the benefit of society.
As with all principles, the start point is to identify the easy wins from the first principle's three values of fairness, respect, and inclusion, and to take it from there. When a business, social organization, or institution rises to the goals of the first principle, it contributes to a fairer, more equal society, one which engenders trust and respect of itself and between the people it serves. The first principle of fairness, respect, and inclusion is the application of the golden rule for social cohesion for businesses and all other organizations or people that contribute collectively to society.
This second principle, we empower individuals and lead by examples on all levels. We basically agree that what we are facing at the moment is a global crisis in trust on the economic and political systems, in international cooperation, in multilateralism, and a more tangible level, or a global crisis of trust in dialogue and discourse, in confidence, universality, empathy, tolerance, of mutual respect, and as I said. And this applies not only for governments, but it also applies for businesses, it applies for media, and regrettably so, it also applies for civil society organizations. And this principle actually contains three key elements. It's on empowerment, it's on leadership, and it's on inclusivity. Empowerment actually goes beyond enabling. It is about giving individuals a voice, allowing for and encouraging a speaking up culture. It is also about educating. Educating, however, not by manipulation, but by broad and extensive exposure to and in-depth and participative dialogue, and all of that in order for all of us to develop, apply, and share free and critical mindsets, and offering individuals, groups, and society skills and opportunities to bridge gaps, foster fairness, and allow for more equity and equality. Corporations play an increasingly critical role in enhancing an environment for developing employee skills, for upskilling or reskilling, all that to enhance mutual respect in job environments, to job satisfaction, further employability, and overall resilience. Leadership. Leading by example is a conditio sine qua non to restore trust. Trust towards leaders, institutions, and stakeholders, and that applies again to all sectors of society. There must be accountability at all levels of the organization. At the same time, it's of course also up to the organization to assign specific roles. Yet, the higher we go up the ladder of hierarchy, the more people and institutions carry responsibility for the res publica, for the common good, the more they are accountable vis-à-vis public value. Leadership by role modeling it has walking the talk at all levels is a particularly key for success and sustainability. And against this background, we encourage business to tie codes of conduct to compensation and promotion so that codes of conduct are taken seriously and are safely implemented. Business needs to actively raise awareness of all employees on and give value to critical skills and impact in addition to just technical ones. Aristotle is quoted of having said once that the human being is its own political con, a social animal. Human behavior is very much driven by our social environment, by peers, by the people we look up to and are dependent on. It eventually shapes our social identity. We shall make therefore compliance with and proactive role modeling of the values of a company, KPIs, key performance indicators of management functions on all levels, with a particular focus, of course, again on senior management. In conclusion, may I recall that Confucius, about 2,500 years ago, said, "The strength of a nation derives from the integrity of the home." And therefore, so let's be clear, the principles that we are just discussing about are not just great opportunities and postulates, they are also responsibility, a responsibility for all of us to lead by example, to role model in the principles implementation and beyond. Therefore, we empower individuals and lead by examples on all levels. Thank you.
Principle number 3 is about recognizing privacy as a human right. More specifically, the principle states that we, as companies, acknowledge individuals as the owners of the data and their privacy as a human right. Well, I can say that this principle may have been one of the most discussed during the labs, the co-creation labs. Very early in the process, it appeared clearly to many of us that we needed to add a D dimension to the ESG criteria that we are used to. We needed to add this D dimension, digital and data, as a matter for business accountability. Why? First, maybe because we all know that data has become the new black gold, and it is a major fuel for the world economy, this we know, and the power of the GAFAM is a very tangible proof of it. Second, because we could consider that every business is basically a software company. All businesses collect individual data, either about customers, employees, or any other stakeholder. And at the same time, they use and develop software. So in using data and algorithms, we could say that every business is able to do predictive analysis of our individual behaviors. So if we say so, we can understand that digital technologies are both, they can bring both new opportunities and new risks. And among these risks, we see negative environmental footprint, social divide, even threat to democracy and human rights. And as a consequence, all the participants, or the majority of the participants to these labs, consider that it is key that business recognize individuals as the owners of the data. And because they are also key to democracy, ownership and privacy of individual data should be respected and protected exactly like other human rights. For that, we recommend, on the one hand, that business be transparent in regards to the collection, storage, transmission, and use of individual data. And for that, companies should keep the public informed about the consequences and benefits of data use. And on the other hand, business should get individuals informed consent, like in the medical field, we could say. and they should commit to the respect and protection of people's and individuals' privacy rights. And this would go beyond the existing regulations, in particular Europe's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. But I think with this step forward is really key in creating public value and common good.
You know, I love this topic,
Yes.
so I have been very active, and congratulations again. The document you have prepared is excellent. I would like to be clear that when you mean that they have to be transparent on the data use, they also need to be transparent on the algorithm and artificial intelligence tools they are using. Because you mentioned algorithms, but without knowing or without going into what is called algorithmic transparency, we are not knowing what the data is being used and what the results of this predictive analysis is based on.
Exactly, we fully agree, and it's going to be a little bit developed in the following principle. Talking about data is one thing, but talking about all the systems that link this data is key, and the system, software, and algorithms, as you say, are part of the obligation of transparency, exactly as you said earlier. Yeah. Principle number 4, about the ethical use of technologies. And it states that we enable and empower human oversight for an inclusive, transparent, and ethical use and application of technologies, data, and knowledge. Here we're going to talk about transparency and ethics. Something for the benefit of society, the environment, and corporate governance. Whatever the progress, whatever the technology, whatever the new, the innovations and so on, whatever the breakthroughs, in fact, companies should always keep in mind and keep as the principle of governance to keep human at the center of their strategies, of their business models, of all their behaviors. In fact, it's about having a human-centered approach. I think when we talk about human oversight, it's making sure that humans keep the control of the machine, if I may say. Of course, we all shared concerns about the pace and the extent of digital transformation, because we have the feeling that everything goes so fast that we can't cope with this pace. And it led us to reaffirm this need for designing a human-centered corporate governance. Again, to protect individuals and to avoid this feeling or this reality that we are being ruled by data. We thought maybe as a part of the solution was to develop ethics and ethical trainings among experts, digital experts, and more broadly is about keeping an ethical view on every technological development.
Yeah, if I may add, we had long discussion on the inclusiveness aspect, on the divide that digital technologies is creating in our societies. The ones who are connected versus the ones who are not. And we also had long discussion on the environmental impact of digital technologies. So two aspects which are regrouped under this principle. Environmental impact and societal impact have to be carefully taken into consideration by the managers of today and tomorrow.
So you're presenting principle 5, good governance for trust.
And this is arguably the guiding principle of them all, because we currently get to experience just how much erosion of trust between different stakeholders can lead to the whole myriad of public health, economic, social, political crises, you name it. Actually, it's the whole bundle if we are not careful. And also, it is most apparent in the political domain. Here it helps to consider countries as mere enterprises that have to manage their stakeholders as well. Companies have been following this suit for quite a while, as they were the earliest to realize the constant feedback loop of reliable information sharing can provide an effective solution to navigate this tricky area of post-truth that we are living in. In order to combat mistrust and what we come to know as a fire hose of falsehood narrative that frequently manifests itself as a not always credible accusation of value washing or greenwashing, companies need to come up with a clear set of metrics that are adapted to one's business activities. And along with this rather Drake-Carrian what gets measured, gets managed dichotomy, it should also be never forgotten that we live in a time, as Michael Gove infamously puts it, when people are getting tired of experts, which is why it's very important to communicate all the messages in a very easy to understand form and in a very accessible form as well. But in addition to the communication purpose of why it's supposed to be that easy, it's also supposed to be easy for the purpose of benchmarking and standardization. Thank you.
Principle 6, we commit to corrective action in collaboration with our peers and stakeholders at large for any negative impact throughout our value chain. This principle sends an aspirational message to alleviate any negative impacts witnessed in the business ecosystem. The principle resulted from intense and very deep discussions involving corporate responsibility and value chains, and addresses a commitment to take the full responsibility for negative impacts by third parties. Implementation of the principle guides companies to identify all stakeholders, those that have an interest at stake and those affected by corporate behaviors, what's now being referred to as double materiality. The resulting stakeholder dialogues builds a community of like-minded individuals discussing the needs of impacted communities and co-creating action plans for corrective actions, one step at a time. Principle 6 enshrines the sense of moral responsibility to take action without the legal risk of accepting full responsibility. Thank you.
We are accountable for making a positive contribution to the societies in which we operate through our business models. So let's look at the three components of this principle. So it begins with we are accountable. This is quite a hard wording, you know, it's compared to we try to, we aim to. And so, but there was a common understanding in all the labs and groups I joined that this trend to holding companies accountable, this trend is stable and reversible. Okay, at the end it says, through our business models. So there was a common understanding that public value and positive contributions are coming from operating sustainable business models with a long-term view. So investors are also important stakeholders. So Larry Fink from BlackRock, he mentioned that purpose-driven companies are able to generate long-term value, and that sustainability should be the standard for investment decisions. So the topic landed also on the CFO desk. So in the middle, it says in the societies in which we operate. So there was a common understanding in the group that that positive contributions and public value should be generated globally in societies and regions, but also within local communities. Hence, it will be very important to involve the local offices and even the individual employees. You know, if you empower and engage the employees that they can initiate bottom-up meaningful initiatives and create public value.
Principle number 8. We strive for systemic improvement towards circularity and regeneration within planetary boundaries. The 8th principle is based on the recognition that our societies need to react to our unprecedented challenges in the form of climate change, unsustainable resource extraction, destruction of ecosystems, and biodiversity loss. For humanity and the rest of the natural world to thrive, we need to change the way we produce and consume to get back into the safe space within planetary boundaries. This requires that companies leave behind the take, make, waste model and the idea that externalities are free and just disappears as if it was pure magic. Instead, companies need to embrace their entire impact and take full responsibility for their conduct, their products, and their services. We need to keep the value of materials and resources at the highest possible levels at all times. Planned obsolescence has to be regarded as an ugly mistake of the past. Instead, all steps from design, production, and assembly to maintenance, upgrade, remanufacturing, and ultimately recycling needs to be focused on longevity and maximum use. And that's the circular economy. And the transition is urgent and systemic. Doing less harm is not enough. Harm is still harm, and we have to build up a lot of, or we have already built up a lot of depth on our planetary bank account. Businesses need to develop from an unconscious extractive mindset to a conscious regenerative mindset, accompanied by a new generation of business models. No company can do this alone. It requires collaboration, partnerships, and transparency. It requires a rewriting of the classical business narrative. And there has never been a better time in history to be extremely ambitious. So let's strive for systemic improvement towards circularity and regeneration within planetary boundaries. Thank you very much.
We aspire to an inclusive global social contract that will improve the lives of people locally and beyond. You can read it. Simple, but very ambitious. I think this is the last principle that maybe is the one that is the most expected by the general public. It gives a human face to the current economic system. And this is what was discussed through all the labs, all the workshops, throughout the work. Give a human face and put the human at the center of the economic system. That means change the growth model to something very different and develop a social contract. This social contract principle relates to stakeholder capitalism. Participants kept mentioning the importance for companies not only to properly map their stakeholders, but to continuously improve their relationship with them, to listen to them continuously and enter into dialogue with them, share their long-term aspirational goals. Social contract sets the ambition of public value creation for the benefit of all and each of us as well. It goes beyond companies' immediate operational rights, duties, and commitments by defining a general aspiration that can model longer-term sustainable business strategies. At Your Public Value, we recommend in-depth dialogue, as you can see, and co-creation of improved governance schemes, as well as ethical frameworks as a basis for a social contract with all stakeholders. I'd like to give the floor to Germaine. I see, thank you, Martin. The conversation is going on in the chat room.
Thank you very much. So my question is really looking at the very first principle, and a rather, for me, surprising emphasis on compliance seems to come after you've dealt with a much more important principle, which is the tone from the top and the responsibility of leaders to walk the talk. I would just query perhaps it's not so important because there are many other principles which are coming, I realize. So perhaps the order is not so important, but I was a little bit surprised by that emphasis.
Yes, thank you. We hope that the public value principles, without any particular order, will mark the path, the roadmap that needs to be developed for companies so they can both make profit and shape the common good. We had several rounds of discussion, and each round would feed the other one. You stop a round when you see that things repeat themselves, that the collective intelligence is actually has arrived at a certain point.
Thanks a lot, Virginie. Dear Virginie, dear all, first of all, great achievement, congratulations. You kind of outpaced our academic work in a way, which is just gorgeous, I would say. This word collectively, exhaustive, mutually exclusive, all the principles coming to my mind, as you wrote, resonate a lot with each other. So congratulations. And I really wish this is being an important and impactful piece in a world of so many different concepts flying around. But I haven't seen any like this, which is so condensed in a way that is, on the one hand, kind of mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive.
I am focusing on our Youth Voices activities, which aim at building bridges between business and the civil society. So I am now going to turn to the youngest among us today to ask you, do these principles resonate with you, and if so, why?
What most inspires me of this principle for public value is the completeness, and what I see has a strong care behind the vocabulary used. The common effort toward inclusion and comprehension really stands clearly in front of the reader, of the audience. As I said, rural development is my field of interest, and principle number 6, correct negative impact, could not but let me think on the invisibles in agriculture. Regarding the principle, 2 elements caught my attention: collective action and negative impact, as I believe that it's crucial not to focus only on what properly works, so on the, let's say, bright side, but to constantly monitor, evaluate, and correct all the steps and action undertaken, leaving nobody behind. The other one is the value chain, to be conceived as an horizontal and not vertical path, connected labor force, producer, distributor, retailer, and customer. In large-scale retail trade, it is particularly hard to consider inclusively the needs of all of those having huge interests at stake and of those affected by corporate behaviors. And it's whether you could identify specific indicators to be suggested to society's organization to measure actual progress in correcting negative impact.
That it's important to measure the impact, because without that, you don't have evidence about what's happening. So that is the very important principle, which actually relates to each of those 9 principles. And as regards kind of measuring and correcting negative impacts, definitely it's important to see impact comprehensively, not only as positive intended impacts, but also as negative impacts, including unintended impact. Each organization would find its own pathway. It's an ambitious agenda which not every organization would take on immediately. And so I think that the measurement of the impact and the implementation of this would happen at 2 levels, really. So on the one hand, some menu of common indicators could be created, covering each of those principles. And this would go some way to tracking how well a company is doing, probably especially concerning the internal factors, which would be consistent to different types of organization. I think it would be necessary to have a more tailored individual approach, especially for external impacts, because those would probably be very specific to the individual organization and the product or service it is that they provide, and which stakeholders they interact with. Great 9 principles. For those, an indicator framework can be developed, and then it would be for each organization to take from that the most relevant indicators for measuring its own impact.
So the one about enforcing a strong and ethical corporate culture. I think that's the most important part, because in a way, software engineers are just trying to answer to a business problem that the management has transmitted. So yeah, I think corporate culture is the first thing to change. And then of course, tying compensation to ethical behavior. But then we need to be sure that all companies in the sector do it, because otherwise that would be giving an unfair advantage to companies that do not abide by those standards.
We discussed that very intensively in at least one group, and there are companies, they have defined very clearly their ambition level, how they want to protect the privacy, and they have on their website written, we consider data privacy a human right. So the question is are all these software engineers, are they all linked to that culture? Have they all internalized the culture, because they all have the technology at hand to do harm? And Apple uses face recognition technology just for logging into your phone. Yeah, it's difficult to define a solution, because it's indeed about business. So, and if you come up with rules which are too, which are damaging the business, then you don't have a chance that it is accepted.
It's principles, it's not KPIs. Oh. We should guide our thinking and provide the space in which we might develop KPIs. And I can easily locate my own work and my chair's work at Leipzig and St. Gallen in this framework, and I'm prepared to communicate and help it to spread it. Our scorecard is more open to other sectors as well, to the private, to the NGO world. And what I see in companies is when they start implementing public value scorecard, they partly integrate it in their balanced scorecard, this way of measuring. And we discover that our public value atlas is a kind of public value scorecard, not so much in the sense of measuring exactly what is to be measured, but opening the doors for dialogue. The question I ask myself since 10 years, why should it be different this time? We have so many pieces, we saw so many pieces, and so many people try to jump on this bandwagon. We see ESG, we see SDGs. There's so many flying words flying around. But originally, as I said, I feel that I would call this our 9 principles might have this advantage of being in a way coherent based on the dialogue you went through with all the workshops and the discussions, condensing it to something which is more than just a European version. In those 9 principles, it's included, so it's in a way universal without being dogmatic, as I would see it right now, if I would reflect upon it.
Just want to say thank you again.
Thank you all. Thank you for your time and contribution. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, goodbye.
Bye-bye.